The secret Endgame connections you missed in the Avengers. Doomsday trailers. With Avengers Doomsday set to premiere on December 18th, there are still many months to go before we find out all the secrets the movie is hiding. It may be even longer before we decipher all the subtle clues and Easter eggs Doomsday will no doubt be filled with. As such, we currently live in a situation where the Marvel Cinematic Universe's fandom is stranded in Fan Theory City looking for clues and crafting their own theories based on what they know of the movie so far. One particularly interesting theory comes courtesy of Reddit Fear itself, who has woven a very interesting web around what they believe are hidden timecode stamps in the Doomsday trailers. According to them, these codes correspond to certain scenes in the Russo brothers' previous Avengers film, Avengers Endgame 2019. Said scenes in turn are intended to offer clues about the central events and concepts of Doomsday. Much of the upcoming film remains unknown, including its complete roster of heroes. After all, the cast of Doomsday has everyone saying that a few key figures seem to be very noticeably missing. Could this fan theory provide some answers? Let's take a closer look at it and see if it can help us decipher some of the secrets the Avengers Doomsday trailers are hiding up their sleeves. Before we take a deeper dive into the rabbit hole, let's take a quick look at the 4 Avengers Doomsday trailers in question. The first one is all about Steve Rogers' Chris Evans, implied to be the Avengers Endgame version, who chose to live out his life in the past with Peggy Carter Haley Atwell. A fresh father, this Steve seems to enjoy a fairly happy domestic existence. However, the trailer makes clear that he will end up caught in the Doomsday scuffle in one way or another. The second trailer is all about a concerned and deathly serious Thor Chris Hemsworth watching over his sleeping adopted daughter Love India Rose Hemsworth and praying for strength. Trailer number 3 brings back the classic Fox roster of the X-Men in the form of a nice moment between Professor X Patrick Stewart and Magneto Ian McKellen. Ruins of the X-Mansion and numerous Sentinels suggest that things aren't going too well for the mutants, and the all-out fury of team leader Cyclops James Marsden seems to support this theory. Finally, trailer number 4 sees Black Panther Shuri Letitia Wright and King M'Baku Winston Duke meet up with Fantastic Four member Ben, the Thing Grim Ebon Moss-Backrack, and Namor Tenoch Huerta, looking uncharacteristically concerned. As Looper has noted before, the Avengers Doomsday trailer rollout was a failure for various reasons. However, the trailers themselves do contain several fascinating moments. If the fan theory that they're playing a longer game with the timestamp tricks turns out to be true, they might reveal their true worth in the long run. So let's unpack the countdown clock messages in the trailers to see what Avengers Endgame moments they tie into. The clock in the Steve Rogers trailer blinks the code 1E24/02/20 just before the countdown itself begins. Following this into the Endgame timestamp, 12/2/40/20 takes the viewer to the scene where the Ancient One Tilda Swinton and Bruce Hulk Banner Mark Ruffalo meet during the time heist. Here, Bruce's attempt to take the Eye of Agamotto, aka the Time Stone, from the deceptively frail-looking Ancient One soon turns into an impassioned verbal back and forth when the Ancient One quite literally punches Bruce into an out-of-body experience. As Doctor Strange's former mentor tells Bruce removing an Infinity Stone from its rightful timeline can be disastrous and will cause branching alternate realities. As for how this relates to the retired Captain America, well, in the end of Endgame, Steve famously removes himself from the equation after returning the Infinity Stones to their rightful spots in time. According to the theory, Steve's actions, either during his mission or after he chooses to live things out peacefully this time around, have gone deeply awry. This confirms that Steve's mission to return the stones and his subsequent decision to stay in the past is central to the conflict. Redditor Fear itself writes about the scene in support of his theory. It suggests his actions may have inadvertently triggered an incursion. The Thor Will Return trailer repeats the countdown clock trick with the code string 1E17/2020. At the 11/70/20 timestamp, Avengers Endgame shows Loki Tom Hiddleston escaping arrest with the Tesseract in the aftermath of the Battle of New York from Avengers 2012. This is a pivotal scene for several reasons. Not only does this particular Loki variant go on to star in the 2-season Disney show Loki, but he ends it by becoming the god of stories who looms over every single timeline out there. Loki is arguably the MCU project that puts the most focus on various timelines and the way they differ from each other. After the primary Loki dies at the hands of Thanos' Josh Brolin in Avengers Infinity War, it also makes sense that the franchise would treat the Loki version of the character as the current main variant. Due to this, it actually makes a surprising amount of sense that a secret code in the Thor trailer would lead into the exact Endgame moment where this Loki variant branches from the main timeline and becomes his own entity. The X-Men trailer is the first stop where the Reddit fan theory gets a little murky. The 1E11/2020 code and the corresponding 11/20 timestamp send the viewer to a scene where Rocket Bradley Cooper witnesses Thor crying in Asgard as the latter is having a panic attack. Per Ufear itself's theorizing this could point to the X-Men's erasure from the timeline, or Asgard losing the Reality Stone, or perhaps simply the emotional tone or stakes of Doomsday. To be honest, this seems quite a bit more far-fetched than the theories around the first two trailers. Fortunately, the thing about fan theories is that the fandom can always further expand on them. Per fellow Redditor Bat Carter, there's another possibility that seems to fit the bill much better. According to them, the Endgame Thor scene could be a reference to another notable crying Thor moment from recent years, the scene in the multiverse-themed Deadpool Wolverine 2024, where a sad Thor is seen watching over a dying Deadpool Ryan Reynolds on a Time Variance Authority screen. As such, the trailer's timestamp code could potentially be a hint that Deadpool will have a role to play in Avengers Doomsday. The last of the 4 released trailers is the Wakanda and Fantastic Four-focused one, which boasts the code 1EO4BR020220, or the Avengers Endgame timestamp 10/14/20. This takes us to the Avengers planning and testing the quantum realm-powered time heist. While somewhat less specific than some of the other Endgame scene teases, this does make a certain amount of sense. All the previous trailer scene references are about the multiverse branching in some way, shape, or form. The Ancient One explaining the nature of timeline branches, Loki escaping with the Tesseract, and Deadpool seeing a version of events that he's unfamiliar with. According to the fan theory, this 4th scene could confirm that the Avengers meddling with powers that shouldn't be touched during the time heist is the root cause of whatever seems to be behind the various timelines meeting in Avengers Doomsday. If you're wondering why anyone would take so much time to go through the trailer and craft elaborate fan theories, you can blame the men behind Avengers Doomsday. One of the reasons this theory has cropped up is the simple fact that Doomsday helmsman Joe and Anthony Russo have already confirmed in no uncertain terms that the 4 trailers have a deeper meaning. What you've been watching for the last 4 weeks are not teasers or trailers they wrote on their joint Instagram after the Wakanda trailer dropped. They are stories. They are clues. Pay attention. This, of course, is effectively a promise that the trailers or stories or clues are more than they seem. Since the changing numbers just before the countdown clock are a recurring feature, and arguably the most eye-popping thing in the trailers that can't be readily explained, they're a natural target for aspiring fan theorists. As such, while some may have wondered why Marvel is doing what it does with the Avengers Doomsday trailers, others have started combing through them for hidden clues, and the You Fear Itself theory is certainly one of the more interesting ones to emerge so far. So what do the countdown clock codes and the timeline-altering antics they may be related to actually mean? To raise a possibility that they could be connected to a very specific concept from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness 2022 known as incursions. As Doctor Strange Benedict Cumberbatch learns in this movie, incursions are the ultimate way for multiversal travel to go awry. 2 universes collide in a way that is destined to destroy one or both. Certain details in Avengers Secret Wars, the upcoming 2027 sequel to Avengers Doomsday, point toward incursions being an instrumental part of the overall storyline. There are 2 major Secret Wars comic book events, but the established existence of incursions in the MCU suggests that the movie will adapt the 2015-2016 iteration. Their incursions force Earths from different universes to fight for their own existence. Doctor Strange and Charlize Theron's cameo character Clea are noticeably absent from the list of announced Avengers Doomsday characters. However, they're last seen entering Clea's native dark dimension to fix a very particular incursion, so it would make sense for them to factor into the Doomsday storyline too. It remains to be seen whether they'll actually appear in the movie, or if Marvel is saving them for Secret Wars, perhaps to play the kind of ace in the whole role Ant-Man Paul Rudd and his quantum realm knowledge do in Avengers Endgame. As mentioned, the Thor Will Return trailer's timestamp suggests that the version of the trickster god, who stars in the Disney show Loki, will factor into the plot of Avengers Doomsday. Even if this doesn't turn out to be true, Doomsday seems to be leaning very heavily on alternate universes and timelines. As such, Loki is definitely recommended viewing ahead of the film's arrival, if only because the Loki variant at its center now sits in the middle of every timeline out there. There is also the fact that the show highlights the very concept of different timelines featuring radically different versions of the same character, as well as the timeline policing Time Variance Authority, and 2 variants of the now-abandoned MCU Big Bad King Jonathan Majors. Loki is an exploration of identity and purpose, and at its very end, Loki Odinson finds his own glorious purpose by fixing the timelines and deciding to guard them for all eternity as Marvel's very own God of Stories. Since Tom Hiddleston is among the announced Doomsday cast members, and the movie focuses on alternate universes, we can certainly expect the God of Stories Loki to make an appearance. Let's circle back to the earlier mention of Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. While he doesn't seem to be particularly connected to the grander events in the MCU, his trajectory has been taking him closer and closer to the mainstream movie by movie. Deadpool has been loosely associated with the X-Men in all of his 3 movies so far, and Deadpool 2 2018 gives him a time travel device that can seemingly access alternate timelines. Deadpool Wolverine takes things even further. It introduces multiple variants of both titular characters and features several key concepts from Loki, namely the Time Variance Authority, and the timeline garbage disposal dimension known as the Void. Deadpool Wolverine finally brings both characters in the MCU or right next door to it anyway. Since it's one of the most notorious timeline-hopping MCU-adjacent movies, that moment where Thor is crying over a dying Deadpool may very well turn out to be an example of Marvel playing the long game before bringing Deadpool's multiversal antics into the MCU proper. Since the serious version of Thor would easily make for the kind of straight-man figure Colossus Stefan Capier serves as in the Deadpool movies, and the Taika Waititi-era comedic Thor would fit right in with Deadpool's overall vibe, the God of Thunder would be a natural scene partner for the Merc with the mouth. So who knows, maybe we'll actually see the two share the screen sooner rather than later. One thing that comes to mind when looking at the grand scheme of things is the distinct absence of one of the most notorious timeline breakers in the MCU. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is conspicuously absent from the cast announcements, and the one truly timeline-themed MCU film the fan theories don't even mention is Spider-Man No Way Home 2021. So what gives a distinct lack of Spidey theorizing makes sense, since the character's next big moment in the limelight will come months earlier than Avengers Doomsday. The next chapter in Peter Parker's life, Spider-Man Brand New Day, is set to premiere on July 31, 2026. The movie will likely address the web-slinger's role in the grand scheme of things, which will no doubt be reasonably substantial. Looper has already told you about the rumored Spider-Man vs. X-Men opening scene of Avengers Doomsday, which might bring at least the Tobey Maguire version of the friendly neighborhood superhero into the mix. As such, we might not only see Spider-Man duking it out in Doomsday, we may very well see more than one of them. There is still one particularly important character missing from all of this. Dr. Doom Robert Downey Jr., the villain who gives Avengers Doomsday its name, is nowhere to be seen in the trailers. In fact, the most we've seen of him so far is a glimpse in a Fantastic Four First Steps post-credit scene. Marvel famously replaced Jonathan Majors Kang with Dr. Doom as the Multiverse Saga's ultimate villain, which means that Doom has inherited a whole bunch of timeline stuff and alternate universe plots to juggle. According to the fan theory, all these timestamp moments in the trailers would double as hints about the villain's true motivations in Doomsday. Since all 4 moments point to Avengers Endgame scenes that lead to the timeline breaking and suggest that the Avengers time heist mission is the root cause of it all, Doom would likely be out to either repair the incursion situation or perhaps more likely abuse it to take control of the timeline. Regardless of what happens, and how much of this theory turns out to be correct, expect the MCU to shake to its very core when Avengers Doomsday premieres on December 18, 2026.